Hey everyone, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking recently declassified files to demystify roughly 80 years of UFO sightings, and we're going to reveal the absolutely fascinating geopolitical strategies behind them. You know, for decades, just hearing the word UFO instantly sparked these wild images of extraterrestrials in sci-fi movies. But when we actually sit down and look closely at the hard data and historical records, well, a much more grounded and honestly way more interesting reality emerges. We're going to trace the timeline of these sightings and link them directly to huge historical events like Cold War military testing and the massive leap in modern surveillance tech.
So, to really hook you right out of the gate, let's rewind back to 1965. Astronaut Frank Borman was about 4.5 hours into the Gemini 7 spaceflight when he completely broke military protocol to radio Houston with this exact phrase, "Bogey, at 10 o'clock high." Now, if you know military lingo, a bogey means an unidentified enemy aircraft or missile. It's a word you use in an active war zone on Earth, and definitely not out in the vacuum of space. Ground control just assumed, hey, it's probably part of the spacecraft's booster, but Borman confirmed he could literally see the booster separately. This unidentified object was something else entirely, proving right then and there that this mystery reaches way beyond our own atmosphere.
But here's the number that I really want you to focus on, 701. See, the U.S. government ran this massive investigation called Project Blue Book from 1952 all the way to 1969. And during that time, they dug into over 12,000 cases of unidentified flying objects. The vast majority easily explained away. Weather balloons, standard airplanes, even planets playing tricks on the eyes. But exactly 701 incidents were left completely unexplained. 701 individual cases where the absolute brightest minds in the military just had to throw their hands up and say, we have no idea.
So, let's get right into the modern mystery: orbs and impossible physics.
Recently declassified footage has totally reignited this global fascination. Take 2023, for example. At an undisclosed location right in America, multiple teams of highly trained federal officers ran into something that honestly sounds like it's straight out of a Hollywood blockbuster. Over the span of 2 days, 6 different agents actually submitted sworn statements to the U.S. government about seeing a massive glowing orange orb just hovering in the sky. And it wasn't just sitting there doing nothing. They watched this thing act almost like a giant mothership, launching these smaller red orbs that zipped forward, up, and down right before the massive object vanished in literally seconds. We're not talking about blurry, out-of-focus amateur photos here. These are trained professional observers documenting events that completely challenge our basic understanding of aeronautics.
And you know what? That 2023 incident is literally just the tip of the iceberg. The recently launched government UFO portal reveals similar impossible physics recorded by high-tech military sensors all across the globe. Like, we have a 2023 case in Greece, captured on infrared, where an object over the ocean took 90-degree turns at 80 miles per hour. I mean, movements like that seemingly defy basic inertia. They would rip any known human aircraft to shreds. Then, in 2024, an anomaly in Iraq flew past the U.S. targeting system at an absolutely incomprehensible speed. Over in Syria, 2 semi-transparent orange areas just appeared and vanished within 2 seconds. And in Japan, a bizarre football-shaped object with 3 distinct projections was spotted in the Indo-Pacific.
But if we take a step back and actually map out all these sightings, from the western U.S. out to Greece, Iraq, Syria, and Japan, a really crucial question emerges, and it kind of pivots this entire story. Why do aliens always seem to visit U.S. military bases? Really think about it. What is it about these highly secure, incredibly tense conflict zones that just magically attracts these unexplained anomalies?
Well, that brings us to the military connection, and a very clear geopolitical pattern.
The geographical clustering of these sightings is absolutely the key to understanding the whole mystery. But to really grasp what's happening, we have to completely redefine the term UFO. We need to strip away all that sci-fi pop culture baggage and bring it right back to its literal military definition. A UFO is exactly what the acronym says, an object that is flying and remains unidentified. To the military, this just means an unidentified drone, an unauthorized aircraft, or even a sensor glitch. It does not automatically mean a spaceship full of extraterrestrials.
Now check this out. Notice how the timeline of UFO hysteria perfectly tracks with the absolute most paranoid years of the Cold War. It's no coincidence. Back in the 1950s and 60s, sightings were heavily clustered in places like the US, the Soviet Union, and Germany. Basically, the absolute hotspots of Cold War tension. From the massive public panic of Roswell in 1947, through the frantic investigations of Project Blue Book, right up to the 1994 declassification of Project Mogul, we are seeing a very distinct, deliberate pattern. It's governments actively managing public perception during times of intense, high-stakes geopolitical stress.
And believe it or not, this entire cultural phenomenon started completely by accident. Back in June 1947, a pilot named Kenneth Arnold spotted 9 shining objects flying at incredibly high speeds over Washington state. But here's the catch. When he described them to reporters, he didn't actually say they looked like saucers. He said they were moving in the way a saucer would if you skipped it across water. He was just describing their movement. But the media misunderstood, they coined the catchy phrase, flying saucers, and boom, a global hysteria was instantly born.
Then, literally just weeks after Kenneth Arnold's famous misquote, some strange debris crashed on a ranch in Roswell, New Mexico. Naturally, the public immediately jumped to the conclusion that an alien spaceship had crashed. And later on, wild rumors even claimed extraterrestrial bodies were recovered. But the military reality, which by the way wasn't fully declassified until 1994, it was much more earthly. That debris was actually from Project Mogul. This was a top-secret program flying highly advanced spy balloons to monitor Soviet nuclear tests. And those so-called alien bodies? Well, a separate 1997 Air Force report revealed they were literally just test dummies being used for high-altitude drops.
So here is the absolute crucial point we need to take away from this. The government intentionally fostered the public's alien theories. Why on earth would they do that? Because it served a massive dual benefit. Think about it. It provided the absolute perfect cover for hiding their own top-secret espionage operations against the Soviet Union. If the public and the global press are busy thinking America is hunting aliens, they're not looking into actual spy tech. Plus, it allowed the U.S. military to test next-generation aircraft right out in the open. If someone saw a top-secret spy plane zooming through the sky, they just assumed it was a UFO. It kept America's actual military secrets perfectly safe.
Fast forward to today, and let's look at modern surveillance technologies, or what we might call the new generation of UFOs.
Because that exact same strategy of misdirection, it heavily applies today. Those recent impossible physics recorded near military bases in Iraq, Syria, and the Indo-Pacific are overwhelmingly linked to a brand new era of foreign espionage assets. We're talking about advanced Chinese high-altitude surveillance balloons, yeah, exactly like the one that famously got shot down over the US in 2023. We're looking at Iranian and Houthi drones monitoring the Strait of Hormuz. And hey, remember that glowing orange orb launching smaller orbs we talked about? Well, intelligence analysts note that China has been actively developing drone motherships that are totally capable of carrying and deploying hundreds of smaller drones midair. So what looks like absolute magic to a casual observer is often just the bleeding edge of rival military technology.
You know, in the world of investigation, there is this golden rule. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Even some of the most incredibly famous sightings in history have surprisingly mundane explanations when we step back and look at them objectively. Take the iconic Apollo moon missions. Legendary astronauts like Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong totally saw mysterious flashing lights and unknown dots right out of their cabin windows. But rather than immediately screaming aliens, the astronauts themselves noted these were likely just sunlight reflections off the lunar module's window covers, or maybe light bouncing off a smooth surface back on Earth, or simply atomic particles interacting with their own eyes out in space.
So, what does the hard evidence actually show? Let's dig into the 2024 AARO report.
When you look at the sheer finality of this official data, it's honestly staggering. The AARO rigorously investigated every single claim and record regarding UFOs from 1945 all the way through 2023. And their official finding? There is absolutely zero evidence that the U.S. government possesses extraterrestrial technology. There is zero evidence of any secret reverse engineering programs of alien craft. The reality behind the vast majority of these wild sightings is simply human innovation. We're talking drones, next-generation weather balloons, highly classified spy planes, satellites, and rockets.
Now, we also need to neutrally acknowledge a really fascinating perspective shared by political analysts and critics. They've observed that suddenly releasing big tranches of unexplained files to the public without providing any proper context or analysis can act as a highly effective political tool. Critics argue that during times of immense administrative pressure, previous administrations have essentially utilized the release of these mysterious UFO files to deliberately distract the media and the public from actual real-world controversies or administrative failures. Mystery, after all, thrives exactly where transparency is absent, which makes it an incredibly potent tool for flipping the news cycle.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought. If governments have successfully spent the last 80 years hiding massive leaps in human innovation behind the convenient, distracting myth of flying saucers and alien visitors, well, how much of our modern mythology is really just classified human technology? When we look up into the night sky and see something completely impossible, are we actually looking at visitors from another world? Or are we simply catching a fleeting glimpse of our own secret future? It's a question that really challenges everything we think we know about the skies above us. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember, keep your eyes on the skies, but more importantly, keep your eyes on the data.